I never imagined the proudest day of my life would end with me sobbing on a bare floor, surrounded by unpacked boxes and the echoes of my own family's cruelty. The key, just moments before, had felt like a medal in my hand, heavy with achievement, the culmination of years of scrimping, saving, and endless overtime. My name is Lata, and this little two-bedroom house, with its slightly overgrown garden and the faint smell of fresh paint, was supposed to be it, the moment everything changed for the better. My fresh start, my sanctuary. I'd practically bounced on my heels waiting for them to arrive, my heart thumping a rhythm of pure, unadulterated joy. When their car pulled up, I rushed to the door, beaming. "Welcome," I announced, swinging the door wide. "Come in, come in." My mother, Valeria, stepped in first, her eyes scanning the empty living room, a space I'd already mentally filled with a comfortable sofa and overflowing bookshelves. My sister Lana followed, a smirk playing on her lips. My father, Paul, brought up the rear, his gaze already drifting towards the floor. "Well, this is it," I said, my voice trembling slightly with excitement. "It needs furniture, obviously, and a lot of work, but it's mine, all mine." I gestured around, pointing out the large window overlooking the garden. "I thought I'd put a little breakfast nook there, and the kitchen needs a complete overhaul, but the bones are good, you know?" Valeria finally spoke, her voice flat. "It's small." Lana snorted. "Small and empty, like your social life." I ignored Lana, my smile faltering only a little. "It's perfect for me, Mom, and it's a start. The mortgage isn't too bad, and I got a decent interest rate." I led them through to what would be the main bedroom. "This room gets the morning sun. Imagine waking up to that." That's when Valeria turned on me. Her face, which had been merely unimpressed, twisted into a mask of fury. "Selfish!" she suddenly shrieked, her voice bouncing off the bare plaster walls, each syllable a hammer blow. "How could you be so utterly selfish, Zlata?" I recoiled as if struck. "What? What are you talking about?" "This money!" Valeria's voice rose, her finger jabbing towards me, then around the room. "This house, this should have been for your brother, for Riker." My stomach plummeted. Riker, of course, my perpetually struggling, always in need of a bailout younger brother. "Mom, this is my money. I saved for this. Riker hasn't worked a steady job in his life." "He has potential," Valeria spat. "He has plans, important plans. He needs a start, a real investment. Not this." She waved a dismissive hand at my dream. "Wasting it all on yourself when your brother is trying to build something." Lana chimed in, her voice dripping with malice. "She's right, you know. You don't deserve this house, Zlata. Always thinking of yourself. Riker could have used that down payment to finally get his business off the ground. The one he was telling us about? The import-export thing? The import-export thing that changed every other week and never materialized beyond vague pronouncements. He wouldn't have used it for a business, Lana, and you know it. He would have blown it, just like every other bit of money he's ever gotten his hands on." My voice was shaking now, the joy draining out of me, replaced by a familiar, sickening dread. "Don't you dare speak about your brother like that!" Valeria advanced on me, her eyes blazing. "He needs support, family support, something you clearly know nothing about." I looked past her desperately to my father. "Dad?" I pleaded. "Dad, say something." Paul just stood there, his shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on a scuff mark on the floorboards. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He just shuffled his feet, a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head, his only contribution. His silence was a roar, louder than Valeria's screams, more cutting than Lana's sneers. It was an affirmation of their every cruel word. "You see?" Valeria said, a triumphant, ugly twist to her lips. "Even your father knows. This is a disgrace, Zlata, a selfish, thoughtless act." Tears were welling in my eyes, hot and stinging. "I worked for this," I whispered, my throat tight. "Every penny. I sacrificed so much." Sacrifice? Lana laughed, a harsh, grating sound. What do you know about sacrifice? Mom and Dad have sacrificed everything for Riker, and you just waltz in and buy a house for yourself? You should give him the money, Valeria declared, her voice suddenly steely. Sell this place, or take out a loan against it. Give Riker what he's owed. It's the least you can do after this betrayal. Betrayal? My head was spinning. They were the ones betraying me, tearing down my proudest moment, stomping on my heart with their entitlement and their blind devotion to Riker. I couldn't speak. The words wouldn't come. I just stared at them, at these people who were supposed to be my family, my supporters. We're leaving, Valeria announced, her nose in the air. I can't stand to be in this monument to your selfishness a moment longer. Come on, Paul. Lana. They turned and walked out, Valeria and Lana still muttering about my ingratitude, about Riker's needs. Paul didn't even look back. The front door slammed shut, the sound echoing through the empty rooms like a gunshot. I stood there frozen for a long moment. Then my knees buckled, and I sank to the floor, the rough wood cold beneath my hands. The sobs came then, racking my body, raw and agonizing. My dream house, my sanctuary, had become a torture chamber in the space of 10 minutes. The unpacked boxes around me seemed to mock my ambition, my hope. Hours might have passed. The light began to fade outside, casting long, gloomy shadows across the bare floors. The tears eventually slowed, leaving me hollowed out, cold, and achingly empty. I pushed myself up, my limbs stiff. Wiping my wet face with the back of my hand, I looked around the dim, silent room. The smell of fresh paint now seemed cloying, suffocating. But as I stared into the gathering darkness, something else began to stir within the emptiness. A tiny, hard kernel of something cold and sharp. The hurt was still there, a gaping wound, but beneath it, a different emotion was taking root. Resolve, an icy, unyielding resolve. They would all pay. One day they would understand what it felt like to have everything taken away, to be humiliated and abandoned by the people who should have loved them most. They would understand. I would make sure of it. The first thing I did after they left, after the sobs finally subsided into a dull, throbbing ache, was to pick up a paintbrush. I'd bought a can of sunny yellow paint for the kitchen. It was supposed to be a cheerful project for the weekend. Now, it felt like an act of defiance. I pried open the lid, dipped the brush, and started on the wall opposite where Valeria had stood, spewing her venom. Each stroke was a reclamation. My house, my color, my life. The next few weeks were a blur of paint fumes, flat-pack furniture assembly, and sheer, stubborn effort. I worked at my marketing job during the day, then came home and worked on the house until I collapsed into a sleeping bag on the floor, too exhausted to even feel the loneliness. I learned to tile a backsplash from YouTube tutorials, my knuckles raw, my back screaming, but the small, gleaming white squares were a victory. I planted a rose bush under the living room window, a vibrant crimson that felt like a middle finger to their drab pronouncements. Contact from them was minimal, and always, predictably, about Riker. A curt text from Lana a month later. Riker needs a bit of cash for a deposit on a sure thing. Mom said to ask you. I deleted it without replying. A voicemail from Valeria a few weeks after that, her voice saccharine sweet. Zlata, darling, Riker was just wondering if you had any old furniture you weren't using for your new place. He's trying to set up his office, you know, for his new venture. Click, delete. Paul, of course, remained silent. It was during this period I met Marlene. She worked in the design department, a few floors above me. We bumped into each other in the break room, both lamenting the terrible coffee. It tastes like despair, she'd said, wrinkling her nose, and I'd laughed, a genuine laugh, for the first time in what felt like ages. With a hint of burnt ambition, I'd replied. We started having lunch together. Marlene was easy to talk to, sharp and funny, with a no-nonsense attitude I appreciated. One rainy afternoon, over soggy sandwiches, the story of my housewarming disaster just spilled out. She listened patiently, her expression growing more incredulous with every detail. "Wow," she said when I finally finished, her voice soft. "Just wow. Your own mother? And sister, and my father by saying nothing. That's brutal, Zlata. Absolutely brutal." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You know, for what it's worth, you did the right thing. It's your money, your life." Her simple validation was like a balm. "Thanks, Marlene. Sometimes I replay it in my head." "Don't," she said firmly. "Use that energy to make your place amazing, and your career. Show them." I took her advice to heart. I poured every ounce of my being into my job. I volunteered for challenging projects, stayed late, pitched new ideas. 6 months later, I landed a significant promotion with a hefty raise. The first thing I bought was a ridiculously comfortable armchair for my living room, a place to sit and read, a symbol of my hard-won independence. Marlene sometimes passed on snippets of news she'd hear through the grapevine, a distant cousin who knew her sister-in-law, that sort of thing. "Heard Riker's latest brilliant idea involved investing your parents' emergency fund in some crypto scheme that tanked overnight," she told me one evening, as we shared a bottle of wine on my newly built small patio. A cold satisfaction trickled through me, but I just shrugged. "Not my circus, not my monkeys." "Good," Marlene said, nodding. "Keep it that way." One Saturday, I was finally tackling the last of the boxes I'd moved from my old tiny apartment. Most of it was junk, but there was one box labeled Mom's Old Stuff, Return, that I'd apparently grabbed by mistake in my hasty departure from the family home years ago when I first moved out on my own. I'd meant to give it back, but then life happened. I figured I'd sort through it and toss most of it. Old magazines, some chipped knickknacks, a few of Valeria's romance novels. Tucked inside one of the books, however, was an envelope. It was unsealed, addressed to me in my father's spidery handwriting. My heart gave a strange little flutter. I pulled out the single sheet of paper. It was dated shortly after I'd first announced I was saving for a house, years before the ambush. "Zlata," it read. "Your mother is difficult about this. She doesn't understand your drive. I'm proud of you. It's not much, but I managed to put aside a little from my pension for your house. Don't tell Valeria. She'd just want it for Riker. Keep going. Dad." Tucked inside the folded paper were 5 crisp $100 bills. Money I'd never received. Money Valeria had clearly found and confiscated. I sank onto the edge of my bed, the letter trembling in my hand. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. A flicker of something warm towards Paul, quickly extinguished by the cold reality of his ultimate cowardice. He'd written the words, yes. He'd even tried to give me money. But he hadn't stood up for me when it mattered. He hadn't stopped Valeria. He hadn't protected me from her, or from Lana. "So," I murmured, staring at the bills, the ink on the page. He wasn't just silent. He was silenced, or simply too weak. I folded the letter carefully, placing it and the money into my own jewelry box. It changed nothing about what they had done, as a unit. It changed nothing about what I knew I still had to do. It changes nothing. 5 years. 5 years I poured into that house, into my career, into myself. The sunny yellow kitchen was now the heart of my home, filled with the aroma of baking or the clatter of pans as I experimented with new recipes. The crimson rose bush had thrived, climbing halfway up the wall, a splash of defiant color against the calm gray I'd eventually painted the exterior. My little 2-bedroom house had become a sanctuary, every corner reflecting my taste, my hard work, my peace, my fortress. Professionally, things had only gotten better. The promotion Marlene had cheered me on for was just the first step. I'd climbed the ladder steadily, my reputation for sharp strategies and relentless execution preceding me. I now managed a whole team, had a corner office with a view that stretched across the city, and a salary that allowed me not just comfort, but choices. The choice to travel, the choice to invest, the choice to live life entirely on my own terms. News of my family, when it came, was like dispatches from a distant, crumbling empire. Aunt Sophia, my mother's estranged sister, would occasionally call, her voice a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. "Valeria and Paul had to sell the big house, you know," she'd informed me one Tuesday evening, her voice crackling over the line. "Riker, apparently. Another one of his brilliant ventures went belly up. Some sort of artisanal pickle company, I think. Lost a fortune. They're in a little townhouse now, over by the old mill." "Is that so?" I'd replied, my voice carefully neutral as I swirled the wine in my glass, looking out at my own meticulously tended garden. "Yes, shame really. That was a lovely house. Your grandmother left it to Valeria, you know." A cold little smile touched my lips. "Indeed, a shame." The old vow, the one I'd made on that bare floor amidst the unpacked boxes, hadn't faded. It simmered, a low, steady heat beneath the surface of my successful life. It wasn't a raging fire anymore, but a patient, waiting ember. Each piece of news about their decline was like a small, dry twig added to it. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but a strange premonition made me answer. "Zlata? Is that you?" The voice was instantly recognizable, though laced with a forced brightness that set my teeth on edge. "Lana." "Yes, Lana. What do you want?" I kept my tone cool, professional. "Oh, Zlata, it's so good to hear your voice. It's been ages." Her insincerity was almost comical. "Listen, I know we haven't really talked, but something amazing has come up, and I immediately thought of you." I waited, saying nothing, letting the silence stretch. "It's Riker," she continued, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "He's got this incredible opportunity, a real game changer this time, a tech startup. It's a sure thing, Zlata, absolutely foolproof. He just needs a little bit of seed capital to get it off the ground, and, well, knowing how well you've done—" "How much?" I cut her off. "Well," she hesitated, "we were thinking 50,000? Just as a loan, of course. He'll pay you back double, triple even, once it takes off. 50,000? The audacity." I almost laughed. "Lana," I said, my voice like ice. "The answer is no." "But Zlata, you don't understand. This is his big break. If he doesn't get this funding, it'll all fall apart. And honestly," her voice took on a whining, accusatory tone, "if you hadn't been so, well, if you'd helped out years ago, with that house money, none of us would be in this position. Mom and Dad are really struggling." There it was, the blame, the entitlement, still there, festering. "My house money, as you call it, built my life, Lana. Something Riker has consistently failed to do with every handout he's ever received. The answer is still no, and lose this number." I hung up before she could reply, my hand surprisingly steady. The call hadn't upset me. Instead, it had stoked that ember, making it glow a little brighter. A loan? A paltry 50,000? No, that wasn't nearly enough. My plans, the ones that had been vague and shadowy, began to take on a sharper, more defined shape. They wanted my help? Oh, they would get it. On my terms, and it would cost them far more than money. Another 2 years drifted by, marked by the steady rhythm of my own life and the increasingly frantic SOS signals from the sinking ship that was my family. Lana's brazen attempt to secure funding for Riker's phantom tech startup had, predictably, gone nowhere. The silence that followed my refusal was, for a while, almost peaceful. Then came the call I'd been half expecting. My mother, Valeria, "Zlata, darling?" Her voice was thin, laced with a tremor I'd never heard before. It was usually so strong, so commanding, so full of accusation. "Hello, Mother," I replied, keeping my tone even. I was in my study, reviewing quarterly reports. I didn't stop highlighting key figures. Oh, Zlata, things have been rather difficult here. A sniffle. Your father and I, well, we had to move again. Oh? I feigned mild surprise. Aunt Sophia had already given me the rundown. The townhouse near the old mill had been repossessed. Riker, it turned out, had borrowed against it using forged signatures for yet another scheme involving imported luxury handbags that turned out to be cheap knockoffs seized by customs. Yes, Valeria continued, her voice thick with unshed tears. We're in a very small apartment now. It's not what we're used to, Zlata. The neighborhood is dreadful. I could picture it. Marlene had driven past out of curiosity once, reporting back that it was a grim, run-down building overlooking a noisy freeway. That's unfortunate, I said, tapping my pen against the desk. Unfortunate? Zlata, it's a disaster. Your father's health isn't good. The stress is terrible for him. And Riker. Poor Riker. He tries so hard, but luck is just never on his side. I almost choked on my water. Poor Riker. And what about Lana? I asked, just to see what she'd say. Lana is doing her best to support us, but it's a struggle for her, too. She doesn't have your advantages. The implication hung heavy in the air. My advantages. The ones I'd clawed for, tooth and nail, while they'd coddled and enabled their precious son into ruin. Zlata, Valeria's voice dropped, becoming wheedling, manipulative. We were thinking, you have that big, beautiful house, all that space. Surely you remember what family is for? We wouldn't be any trouble, just until we get back on our feet. I let the silence stretch, imagining her on the other end, twisting the phone cord, her face pinched with desperation. The image brought a grim sort of satisfaction. Mother, I said finally, my voice polite, almost gentle. I'm very busy with work right now. I'm afraid I can't really discuss this. I have to go. My team is waiting. But Zlata? I'll call you back when I have a moment. I lied smoothly and hung up. I didn't call back. Later that week I started sketching. Idle doodles at first, on a notepad during a boring conference call. A floor plan of my property. The main house, the garden, and the old, detached garage at the far end of the driveway. It was a relic from when the house was first built, used now for storing lawnmowers and forgotten Christmas decorations. It was structurally sound, but bare concrete floors, no insulation, a single grimy window. My doodles became more precise. Dimensions. Potential placements for basic amenities. A dark what-if scenario began to take shape, a chilling blueprint for a very specific kind of welcome. The final piece of fuel for my simmering plan came, as it often did, via Marlene. We were having our weekly dinner, this time at a new Italian place she'd discovered. You are not going to believe what I heard, she said, leaning forward after the waiter had taken our orders. About? I asked, sipping my wine. Riker, of course. My cousin's hairdresser's sister cleans for a woman who lives in your parents' old neighborhood, and apparently the gossip is flying. Do tell. So, after his latest business, the one with the fake handbags, went spectacularly bust, and your parents lost the townhouse, Riker apparently had a massive meltdown, screaming, throwing things. And get this, Marlene's eyes widened. He told Valeria and Paul, in no uncertain terms, that it was all your fault. I raised an eyebrow. My fault? How does he figure that? Because, Marlene relayed, her voice laced with disbelief, he said you had it easy, that you bought your house with money that should have been his seed capital. He told them you owed them big time for all the support he supposedly missed out on because you were so selfish. And the kicker? He told them they should make you pay up. A cold, hard fury, sharper than any I'd felt in years, shot through me. It wasn't the familiar ache of past betrayal. This was fresh, white-hot rage. Make me pay up? After everything? after they had bled my parents dry with his endless failures and entitlement? The doodles on my notepad suddenly seemed less like a what if and more like a concrete, inevitable future. The ember of my vow roared, just for a moment, into a blazing inferno. Oh, someone was going to pay. But it wouldn't be me. The news of Riker's latest pronouncement, that I owed them and should be made to pay up, settled something deep inside me. The last vestiges of any complicated feelings, any lingering shadows of familial obligation, were burned away. There was only a cold, clear path forward. My sketches of the garage became more detailed, more purposeful. It took another 6 months for the final act of their self-destruction to play out. The source this time was a distant cousin, Maria, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. She called me one evening, her voice hushed and nervous. "Zlata? It's Maria. I don't know if I should be telling you this, but I thought you should know." "Know what, Maria?" I asked, already sensing the familiar scent of disaster. "It's Uncle Paul and Aunt Valeria, and Riker, of course. He got himself into some real trouble this time. Something about investment fraud? I don't know the details, but it's bad. Apparently, he convinced a bunch of people, some pretty shady characters, to invest in a non-existent beachfront development in Costa Rica." I leaned back in my chair. Classic Riker. Always a grand scheme, always someone else's money. "And?" I prompted. "And," Maria sighed, "he used your parents as guarantors, forged their signatures on some documents, apparently. Now the whole thing has collapsed. The investors are furious, and they're coming after Paul and Valeria for everything. They're being evicted from that little apartment, Zlata, like tomorrow. They have nowhere to go." Eviction. The word hung in the air. So it had finally come to this. Rock bottom. "Maria," I said, my voice calm, "why are you telling me this?" "Well," she hesitated, "Aunt Valeria, she's been telling everyone that you'll take them in, that you have that big house and you're her daughter and of course you'll help. They're planning on calling you, Zlata. They're desperate." A slow, cold smile spread across my face. "Thank you for the warning, Maria. I appreciate it. Zlata, I know things have been bad between you all, but they're still family." Her voice was pleading. "Yes, Maria," I said. "They are, and family should always be welcomed. Don't worry." I hung up, the smile still fixed on my lips. The what-if scenarios, the idle sketches, were no longer hypothetical. They were a concrete plan, ready to be executed. My fortress was about to receive its long-expected, thoroughly unwelcome guests. The next morning I made a call. "Morning, Mr. Henderson," I said brightly into the phone. "Zlata Rivera here. I have a small project for you, if you're available on short notice." Mr. Henderson was a local contractor, a grizzled, no-nonsense man who'd done some excellent work on my garden fence last year. "Ms. Rivera, always a pleasure. What can I do for you?" "It's about the old detached garage on my property," I explained. "I need it cleared out. And a few minor modifications, very basic. I need it done today, if possible." "Cleared out? Like a full gut?" No, nothing so drastic. Just tidied, swept. And I need 3 simple cots set up in there, army style if you have them, and a portable camping toilet, the kind you use for festivals. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear Mr. Henderson scratching his head. "Cots and a camping toilet? In the garage? You planning a very rustic guest suite, Ms. Rivera?" "Something like that," I said smoothly. "It's for some unexpected visitors. And one more thing, Mr. Henderson. I need a new, very sturdy lock installed on the garage door, one that can only be opened from the outside with a key, and a deadbolt on the inside of the door leading from my kitchen into the main house. Top quality, please." Another pause, longer this time. "Right," he said finally, his voice carefully neutral. "Cots, camping toilet, new lock on the garage, deadbolt on the kitchen door. Consider it done. My crew can be there by noon." "Excellent, Mr. Henderson. Send the bill to my office." I hung up and walked to my kitchen window, looking out at the garage. It stood there, unassuming, a forgotten outbuilding. Soon, it would be their 5-star accommodation, my meticulously prepared welcome. The rage from Riker's reported words had cooled now, banked down into an icy resolve. They wanted me to pay up? Oh, they would see. They would see what the real price of their actions looked like. The suite, as I'd started to call it in my mind, would be ready. Mr. Henderson and his crew were as good as their word. By late afternoon, the old garage had been transformed. Not into anything comfortable, mind you, but into exactly what I'd envisioned. The cobwebs were gone, the concrete floor swept clean. 3 stark metal cots, each with a thin mattress and a single coarse blanket, were lined up against one wall. In the far corner, a chemical toilet stood sentinel, a monument to basic necessity. A single bare bulb hung from the rafters, casting a harsh, unforgiving light. The new lock on the main garage door gleamed. The deadbolt on my kitchen door felt wonderfully solid. I surveyed their handiwork with a grim sense of satisfaction. It was perfect, perfectly awful. The call came just as I was finishing a solitary, peaceful dinner. The caller ID flashed, "Valeria." I let it ring 3 times, savoring the anticipation, before answering with my most pleasant, accommodating tone. "Hello? Zlata? Oh, Zlata, thank God you answered." Valeria's voice was a torrent of frantic relief, laced with an undercurrent of hysteria I'd been expecting. "Darling, it's a nightmare. A complete and utter nightmare." "Mother? What's wrong? You sound upset." I injected a note of mild concern into my voice, picturing her on the other end, probably wringing her hands, Paul hovering uselessly nearby. "Upset? Zlata, we've been evicted, thrown out onto the street like common criminals. That dreadful landlord, he wouldn't listen to reason. We have nowhere to go. Absolutely nowhere." Her voice cracked, and I heard a distinct sniffle, quickly followed by what sounded like a theatrical wail. "Evicted?" I echoed, feigning shock. "Oh, Mother, that's terrible. What happened?" "It's Riker," she sobbed. "That poor, unfortunate boy. He was just trying to make something of himself. A little misunderstanding with some business associates. They're being so unreasonable. And now your father and I, and Lana, we're homeless. Can you imagine? Homeless." I could, quite vividly, and the image didn't fill me with the pity she was clearly trying to elicit. "Where is Riker now?" I asked, keeping my voice gentle. "Oh, he has some other arrangements he's trying to make," Valeria said vaguely, a little too quickly. "He's very resourceful, you know. He'll sort something out for himself. But it's us, Zlata, your father, Lana, and me. We have nowhere to turn. Our suitcases are on the pavement." The lie about Riker was so transparent it was almost insulting. He'd abandoned them, of course, just like he always did when the consequences of his actions came knocking. "That's awful, Mother, truly awful." I paused, letting the silence hang, letting her desperation build. I could almost hear her holding her breath. "Zlata?" she finally whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears and forced humility. "Your house, it's so big. You have all those rooms. We were wondering, we were hoping, could we possibly, just for a little while, darling, just until we can find our feet? We wouldn't be any trouble at all, I promise. We'd be quiet as mice." Her voice was dripping with a sweetness so artificial it made my teeth ache. The picture of them arriving, expecting tearful forgiveness, expecting to be ushered into my comfortable guest rooms, expecting me to foot the bill for their son's latest catastrophe, was crystal clear in my mind. I took a slow, deliberate breath. "Mother," I said, my voice now smooth as silk, perfectly accommodating. "Of course you can come here. You're my family. Where else would you go?" A choked sob of relief came from the other end. "Oh, Zlata. Oh, thank you, darling, thank you. I knew you wouldn't let us down. I told Paul, I told Lana. Zlata has a good heart. She'll understand. I understand completely, Mother, I said, and for once, it was the absolute truth. Come whenever you're ready. I'll be here. We'll be there as soon as we can get a taxi, she gushed. Oh, Zlata, you're a lifesaver, a true angel. Drive safely, Mother, I said, and hung up. I walked to my living room window, the one overlooking the pristine garden I'd cultivated with such care. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows, and the crimson roses glowed with an almost unnatural intensity. A chilling smile played on my lips. Let them come, I murmured to the empty room, to the silent, waiting house. The suite is almost ready. My heart was beating steadily, a calm, rhythmic drum. There was no anger now, no pain, only a cold, clear sense of purpose. The years of planning, the years of waiting were about to culminate. They were walking willingly into the trap I had so meticulously prepared, and they had no idea. An hour later, a battered taxi pulled up to the curb. I watched from behind the sheer curtains of my living room window as Valeria, Lana, and Paul slowly extricated themselves and their worn suitcases from the vehicle. Valeria was already dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, a picture of weary tragedy. Lana looked around with a familiar expression of disdain, though it was tinged with a new, anxious uncertainty. Paul, as ever, looked defeated before the battle had even begun, his shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the pavement. I waited until they were halfway up my garden path before opening the front door. I'd schooled my features into an expression of cool, polite neutrality. Mother, Lana, Father, I greeted them, my voice even. Welcome. Valeria rushed forward, arms outstretched as if for an embrace. Oh, Zlata, thank you, thank you. You have no idea what this means to us. I sidestepped her intended hug smoothly. Please, come in. They shuffled into my hallway, their eyes darting around, taking in the polished hardwood floors, the tasteful artwork, the general air of quiet prosperity. I saw a flicker of something, envy, resentment, in Lana's eyes before she quickly masked it. Your house is lovely, Zlata, Valeria said, her voice still a little too bright. So spacious. Thank you, I replied. If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your accommodations. I could feel their anticipation, their expectation of soft beds and private bathrooms. I led them through my immaculate kitchen, the aroma of freshly baked bread, a deliberate touch, I admit, hanging in the air. Paul actually sniffed appreciatively. I paused at the newly installed deadbolt on the back door, leading to the garden and, by extension, the garage. With a small, deliberate click, I unlocked it. This way, I said, pushing the door open and stepping out into the cool evening air. I led them down the short garden path towards the detached garage. Confusion began to cloud their faces. Zlata, darling, where are we going? Valeria asked, her voice wavering slightly. The guest rooms are upstairs, aren't they? This is what I have available to line, I said, stopping before the garage door. I produced a single key and unlocked the new sturdy lock Mr. Henderson had installed. I pushed the door open, revealing the stark, cold interior. The single bare bulb cast harsh shadows on the 3 cots and the chemical toilet in the corner. A stunned silence fell. Valeria's jaw literally dropped. Lana stared, her mouth agape, her eyes wide with disbelief and dawning horror. Paul just looked lost. This, I announced, my voice devoid of any warmth, any welcome, is all I can offer. Valeria found her voice first, a strangled shriek. What is this? What is the meaning of this, Zlata? How dare you? Lana, recovering quickly, pointed a trembling finger at the cots. You expect us to sleep in there? On those things? With a bucket for a toilet? Are you insane? It's clean, I said calmly, and dry, and secure. This is an outrage, Valeria shrieked, her face flushing a dangerous shade of purple. After everything we've been through, after all we've done for you. Done for me? I repeated, my voice dropping, taking on an icy edge that made even Valeria flinch. "Let's talk about what you've done for me, Mother. Do you remember that day, years ago, in my first house, the empty one? Do you remember what you screamed at me then?" Her eyes darted nervously. I don't recall." "Oh, I do," I said, my voice low and clear. "You called me selfish. You said the money for my house should have gone to Riker. You said I didn't deserve it." I turned to Lana. "And you, Lana, you sneered and told me I didn't deserve my house. Remember that? Small and empty, like your social life, I believe, were your exact words." Lana paled, her bravado deflating. "Perhaps," I continued, my gaze sweeping over their horrified faces, "you don't deserve comfort either. Perhaps this is all you've earned." "This isn't right, Zlata," Paul finally mumbled, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes pleading. "This isn't kind." I rounded on him, the years of his silent complicity fueling my cold anger. "Kind? Were you kind, Father, when you stood by and watched them tear me apart? When your silence was louder than their screams? Your silence then bought you this silence from me now. These are the only terms. No access to the main house. You can take it or you can leave it." Lana, her face contorted with rage, suddenly lunged at me, her hand raised to slap. I sidestepped her easily, her momentum carrying her stumbling a few paces. "Don't even think about it, Lana," I warned, my voice deadly calm. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the single key to the garage and a neatly printed list. "Here is the key to your suite," I said, holding it out. Paul numbly took it. "And this," I added, handing him the list, "is a list of local homeless shelters and their contact numbers. You have 1 hour to decide. My property, my rules. Just like it was my down payment. My house, my rules, back then." Without another word, I turned my back on their stunned, furious faces, walked back into my warm, luxurious kitchen, and locked the deadbolt firmly behind me. The satisfying thud of the bolt sliding home was music to my ears. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff I usually saved for celebrations, and settled into my comfortable armchair in the living room. From my window, I had a clear view of the garage. The single bare bulb cast a stark, yellowish glow out of its grimy window. I could hear raised voices, Valeria's shrill tones clearly distinguishable even through the closed kitchen door and across the garden. Lana's angry shouts punctuated her mother's tirade. Paul's voice was a low, inaudible rumble. They argued for a good 45 minutes. I watched, sipping my wine, a strange calm settling over me. There were moments of furious gesturing, Lana storming back and forth in the small patch of light outside the garage door, Valeria wringing her hands. Paul mostly stood, head bowed. At one point, Lana kicked one of their suitcases. It skidded across the concrete driveway. Then, as the hour mark approached, I saw a shift. The shouting subsided, replaced by a defeated quiet. Lana picked up her suitcase. Paul, after a moment, picked up his and Valeria's. Valeria stood stiffly, her back to my house, but I could imagine the expression of utter humiliation on her face. Without a single glance towards the garage or towards my warm, well-lit home, they trudged back down the driveway, their shoulders slumped, their movements heavy with defeat. They didn't even try the garage door. They just left, disappearing into the darkness of the street. I watched until the taillights of another taxi, presumably one they'd called, vanished around the corner. Then I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. It was done. A complex wave of emotions washed over me. There was a profound, grim satisfaction, yes. A sense of justice, harsh but undeniably served. But there was also an emptiness, the quiet that follows a storm, the recognition that the scars, though avenged, remained. The victory was real, but it wasn't joyous. It was just final. Marlene came over the next evening, a bottle of my favorite Pinot Noir in hand. "So," she said, settling onto my sofa, "spill. How did the family reunion go?" I recounted the events, from their desperate call to their defeated departure. Marlene listened intently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Wow, Zlata," she said softly. "That's intense, even for you." "Was it too much?" I asked, the question genuine. Marlene considered. "It was harsh," she admitted. "Definitely harsh. But honestly, after everything they put you through, that initial ambush, the years of entitlement and blame, no, I don't think it was too much. They built that garage, Zlata, brick by miserable brick, with their own actions. You just handed them the key." Her words were a comfort, an affirmation I hadn't realized I needed. "Riker, of course, was a no-show," I added. Valeria tried to cover for him, but it was obvious. "Predictable," Marlene snorted. "He'll have landed on his feet somewhere, probably already spinning his next sob story to some other unfortunate soul." A few days later, Aunt Sophia called again, her voice buzzing with ill-concealed gossip. "Zlata, you will not believe it. Valeria, Paul, and Lana are staying in that awful emergency housing unit over by the industrial park, the one with the shared bathrooms. Can you imagine? Valeria Rivera in a place like that. Apparently Riker completely vanished, left them high and dry. Again." "Is that so?" I said, my voice neutral. I felt nothing. No pity, no triumph, just a distant sort of finality. They were out of my orbit, their problems no longer capable of touching me. The revenge hadn't magically erased the pain of that day in my empty house. It hadn't healed the old wounds completely, but it had redrawn the lines. It had reclaimed my power. It had brought a harsh, necessary closure. They had faced the direct consequences of their choices, not filtered through my unwilling intervention or their manipulative pleas. I looked around my beautiful home, at the sunlight streaming through the clean windows, at the books lining the shelves, the art on the walls, the comfortable furniture I'd chosen with such care. This house, my sanctuary, my fortress, was finally, truly, just mine, untainted by their demands, their expectations, their bitter presence. They made their choices then and now, I thought, swirling the last of my coffee in my favorite mug. And I made mine. This house was never about them needing rescue or me needing their approval. It was always about me, my strength, my resilience, the life I built, not just in spite of them, but for myself. And that, I realized, was the truest piece of all.